So a lot of talk already this offseason with I'm sure more to come as we head into training camp about the Saints moving Trevor Penning from right tackle to left guard. The Saints have a history of being able to do this, a coaching staff with some experience in making moves like this, and even Erik McCoy seems to think it's a good idea. We'll break it all down. I'm Tim. Let's talk Saints. Moving Trevor Penning from a tackle position to a guard position, first off, is not an unheard of thing. It's not an uncommon thing in the NFL. In fact, it can kind of be common at times. Um, the most recent example, and we've talked about this, and it comes up specifically because as we'll get into the experience portion of this video, some of the coaches involved with last year, Mekhi Becton, Philly acquiring him. He was a tackle for 3 years, 4 years with the Jets, moving him to guard, kind of worked out swimmingly. Another recent example, if you can remember, Laramie Tunsil drafted by Miami out of Ole Miss as a tackle. He kind of played some tackle in Miami, and I don't want to say he struggled, but it wasn't going the way they wanted. They did move him to guard for a little while, eventually back out to tackle. He gets traded to the Texans, and at that point, his career really took off. So seems to have been a good move. There's been plenty in the NFL where you can go back and find um, this transition that does happen. In Saints history, I can go all the way back to Jim Dombrowski in 1989. Saints drafted him in 1985 as a tackle, played there. He wasn't terrible, but they felt, hey, let's try him at guard, think it's going to be better. Absolutely was. For there was a stretch where he was one of the best guards in the NFL. Now that's ancient history. I'm old enough to remember it, but some of you may not. But and you also have to bring up the question, well, what difference does that make? There have been several times where the Saints in intermediate times have done it, but I think the relevant ones, 2006, Jahri Evans out of a small college, Bloomberg was a tackle there, showed up with the Saints, and I'm pretty sure from the get go they knew they were going to try him at guard. Worked out fantastic. You want to talk about a guy who was one of the best guards in the league in his career, in his time with the Saints. Jahri Evans fits the bill. In fact, I think it's an absolute travesty nobody's even talking about Jahri Evans being in Canton because he should be, in my opinion. Not too long after that, a couple years later, 2008, Carl Nix, drafted out of Nebraska. He was a college tackle. Came in, kind of started as a tackle, but got bumped to the inside, moved to left guard. 4 years he was here, he was a beast. And those two guys were the starting guards on our Super Bowl run and into the couple of seasons afterward before Nix um, left in free agency to Tampa Bay. And I'm curious, just not curious, but certain in a certain way that had he not, his career basically ended prematurely because of a staph infection problem that really did some damage to his body. He'd have been another one that would have spent years being one of the best guards in the league and would have a legitimate shot, I think, to make it into Canton. 2012. This is one I think, and this was an important one for what eventually happened to him and what the Saints needed. But in 2012, Senio Kelementi was drafted out of Washington by Arizona, played tackle. Arizona tried moving him to guard. Didn't really work out. I believe he may have actually gotten to one game his rookie year for Arizona. Ends up getting released. The Saints grabbed him in 2013. Pretty much was a practice squad guy. But the Saints started the transition to moving him to guard. By 2014, he had worked his way on the 53-man roster, started his working his way up as one of the backup swing players because he still played a little tackle, but primarily started moving to guard. 2015, he really established himself as one of the primary backups at guard, started getting spot tackles due to injury, so much to the point that in 2016 and 2017, he combined for 17 starts at guard in those 2 years due to injury and played exceptionally well. And even during those years when the those 2 seasons when the starters came back, he could still fill in at tackle and even grab some snaps as a backup center. He became an integral piece in those years for us till he became a free agent and quite frankly a little too expensive for us to re-sign. The Texans grabbed him. He was a starter there in his first season, and then he started getting some injury issues that slowed down his career. Andrews Pete in 2015, drafted as a left tackle out of Stanford. Now, I think the thought was they wanted to keep him at tackle, and in a move that kudos to the Saints when they realized we're not sure it's going to happen, they moved him into guard. And a little bit like Laramie Tunsil, but just not quite to the level of Tunsil because, you know, Andres Pete helped us out a lot, but he wasn't on, isn't, I don't believe, on Laramie Tunsil's level. But similar path was at guard. Did an outstanding job at times when we had injuries, especially when Teron Armstead was a left tackle, and Teron would have a couple of games where he would get banged up and miss some time. We could kick Pete back out and handle the left tackle position. He did that up until last year when he left in free agency. Raiders, I believe, signed him. So there's a history there that the Saints have made this move. And I know there's some failures in there, but in the history of trying to be positive that this is going to work, there are some successes. One of those successes, and we're going to transition right into the coaching staff part of this, because you got to start with one of those successes was Jahri Evans, who right now is an assistant offensive line coach for the Saints. You can't tell me that's not going to help. Another, I think, key player in this is, and by coincidence, he showed up in 2015 when Andrews Pete was drafted and Clemente was already in the process of making that transition to guard as Brendan Nugent, our offensive line coach. Now, he was basically an assistant, much like Jahri Evans is now. And I mean, it could be pure coincidence, but I'm thinking he probably had at least a little bit to do with the transitioning of Pete and Cineo. But even if he wasn't directly involved, the coaching staff that did it with Evans and Nix was primarily still there when he showed up as the assistant. I got to think he learned something because he became a good offensive line coach for us and went on and furthered his career in the NFL. It's not like he went away and we brought him back when Kellen Moore was hired. The experience just coming out of those two, I think, is huge in trying to get this to work. But then you still have to talk about, we just mentioned Mekhi Becton. Think about what's coming out of Philly, because you have, obviously, our head coach was the offensive coordinator, Kellen Moore. TJ Paganetti was the run game specialist and an assistant offensive line coach. He's now basically our run game coordinator. You know, those two were heavily involved in this. There was almost no way possible when they moved Becton, they weren't. Okay. Now you got to throw in Doug Nussmeier in this. I realize he was the quarterback coach in Philly, and so probably more maybe a limited observer and as more than a maybe active participant in this. But you got to consider quarterbacks in the modern NFL pretty much have to know what everybody in the offense is doing almost every single play. So I really think a quarterback coach would be purely interested, considering the quarterback does have to at times handle some protection issues or make some, I don't necessarily say the offensive line center can handle that, but he's got to be involved and know what's going on. So now that Nussmeier's offensive coordinator, he's seen it once and he's seen it work successfully. And like I said, I don't think he was oblivious to what they were doing. I don't see how he could have been. So there's experience coming over from Philly on this, on the success of Mekhi Becton. If you look at each one of these scenarios kind of individually, you'd be like, yeah, look, it's got a chance. But in my mind, when you combine it all together, the organizational end, the coaching staff, the everyone involved in that end, there should be plenty enough there to make this work. And I think right now, to get this to work, it's all on Trevor Penning's shoulders. And I don't have a lot of concerns there. There are some, but he made a transition last year, just flipping tackles, going from the left side to the right side, an improvement. Now, it could be mostly a scheme based improvement, and we're going to be working a slightly different scheme. I don't think we'll see as much of that wide zone. I don't see how, because that was all we basically did last year. So I don't see we'll see it as much. But I don't I don't think the gap in the more inside zone look that we're probably going to have may not necessarily hurt him because of his size and his skill set, and his aggressiveness is kind of a lot of the stuff you're looking for at that left guard. If he can successfully make the transition, he wouldn't be, and I don't know if he'll be this good, but God willing, he will be. Could be a very similar Carl Nix type feeling with that big, strong, wide bodied, likes to go run over people when he blocks them type guy at the guard position, which that attitude I think is just a little better suited for a guard, especially a left guard, than maybe the tackle. So I think Penning's end of it, if he does the work, is able to grasp the concepts and learn, because it's going to be different for him moving from an outside on the end of the line of scrimmage as a tackle, where man, the help isn't as much. The calls are going to be completely different. It's even a different side of the line. So all that could factor into it. But if he can handle all that, I feel good that you have, like, you may not ever have an all pro left guard in Trevor Penning moving there. But if you have a solid guy that we can rely on to do the job that they're going to be asking him to do, it'll work out for us. Another thing that's going to affect Penning is when you think about our offensive line, um, if we have problems with Banks or Fuaga on the tackles, it's going to affect the interior, right? McCoy should be a solid anchor, which should help Penning out a lot. But in this case, if you're talking Banks on the left side, if we start having problems with Banks, it's going to affect Trevor Penning and his ability to play. He can play a decent guard, and we've seen this around the NFL. But when one side starts to collapse, we've seen it on the Saints over the years at times. One side starts to collapse because of a player that can't hold the spot. The player next to him a lot of times is going to suffer. We went through a period a few years ago where our guard play overall was weak in both spots, and Erik McCoy, who's one of the best centers in the league, his play suffered. It's just the way it is. So he's going to be tied in, I believe, heavily into specifically what goes on with Banks. But I think everybody has confidence so far that Banks is going to be able to do his job. So that happens, then yeah, it's all right back on Penning to do what he's going to do to make it work, because I think from the organizational side, we're going to be fine on the coaching and the staff trying to help him out in that transition. So I believe it was the second day of minicamp, may have been the first, but Erik McCoy, media got in front of him. He gave at his locker after practice, and he talked with them for a bit. And there was a question that came up about Trevor Penning. And when I saw it, I just kind of had to laugh. Let's just say Erik seems to be very excited about this whole thought process of moving Trevor Penning.
Next to you. What do you think?
Oh, that guy right there?
Yeah.
Look at him. He's big. He's physical. He's violent. He's like 6'7", 340. Like, the guy's huge. He's a giant. Still working on some technique stuff, but I think that we're going to hone in on that over the offseason and in camp, and he's going to be a great addition there.
Kellen Moore called his skill set perfect for that spot. He used the word perfect.
Yeah.
Would you agree with that?
Yeah. I mean, you look at somebody that just recently made that transition at Philadelphia, Mekhi Becton, similar build, similar size, and how that panned out. And love McCoy. I think he's a great guy. I think Trevor might be even just a notch more physical than he is. Um, so I would agree. Yeah.
So I love when the question came out, and apparently McCoy was just off camera right behind everybody, and he's just, oh, hey, love that guy. And he talked about the size and the physicality. And then when they asked him with the follow up on what Kellen Moore said he was perfect, McCoy's take on, um, and apparently he knows Mekhi Becton fairly well because he's like, yeah, Mekhi, I love that guy, and familiar with the transition, knows what a left guard needs to be in the NFL. I would think he's got one of the better ideas as among the players and how this is going to go. He seems to be on board with it. But what he was echoing, what Kellen Moore was talking about being physical and kind of made for the position. Here's the reason why I was chuckling over his exuberance, and one because I'm partly because I think his exuberance is, my God, it would be nice if we had a consistent good left guard next to me. My job becomes easier, and we have a better chance of winning. First and foremost, but really the second thing that kind of made me chuckle about that is going all the way back to 2022 when we drafted Trevor Penning. At the time, majority of the people's draft profile, and I'm being nice because I really want to say everybody but the Saints draft profile was shows some traits that he could possibly be a tackle and a left tackle at some point in the league. Most people thought he's a guard. And there was a lot of talk, like we talked about some of the other players, may get a shot at tackle, but may have to get bumped inside to guard and then at some later point go back out to tackle. The Saints basically, whatever they were trying to accomplish with him, throwing him to the Wolves and just, hey, go be a left tackle, especially since it looked like that staff did nothing to prepare him for the NFL level. And he did have some injury histories, and that slowed him down too. But it seems like we never allowed for that because at some point, this moving him to guard thinking over the years just kept coming up, and they were just resistant to do it. And then pretty much new staff comes in, and the first thing they go, let's move the big guy at right tackle to left guard. I mean, that profile was out there. And that's another reason why I'm feeling a little, confident in what is going on here with the Trevor Penning move, because we kind of coming around to the thinking. And this goes into, there was a period of time with the Saints in the decline that I talk about that started 2020, 2021. That I think there was this arrogance of, we know what we're doing. Everybody else is wrong. We're fine, and doubling and tripling down on bad ideas. And that was one of them. I think if they just bit the bullet earlier, even if they'd have caught some flack. Well, you drafted a guy that's going to play guard and in the first round. That happens, and it happened with Andrews Pete. They had the perfect example. If they'd have taken more of an Andrews Pete approach, who knows what we'd have in Trevor Penning right now. So this, in my mind, as the Saints organization and the people in charge prior to this, making this move with Trevor Penning, they are extremely late to the party. But the only thing I can say at that point is better late than never, because I think there's enough here to look at and go, keep him healthy. We should get some serviceable, if not pretty good guard play out of him on that left side. And as we mentioned earlier, Bank struggles or fails, how it's going to affect Penning. Penning succeeds and Banks doesn't. Wouldn't it be nice to have one of those left sides of the Saints offensive lines, you know, Bushrod Nix, Armstead and Pete, and be able to roll that out for the next couple of seasons? That process should have been started a couple of seasons ago. But like I just said, I guess better late than never. That's it for today. If you like what you saw first time here, please go ahead, hit the subscribe for me, give me the thumbs up. Let's just keep working that algorithm hard. Um, in the comments below, I definitely want to hear what y'all think about this move. Um, I don't think anybody was necessarily resistant to it that I've seen or heard, um, going, "Oh, that's a bad idea." Not unlike, like I mentioned earlier, when we started him at left tackle and then kept him there, as tried to for as long as we could, when people were going, "Man, that ain't gonna work." So, and look, I like Trevor Penning. May not have always liked the way he played on the field. Thought he improved a lot last year, and I would like to see to get some success out of this. And again, if this works, it would be nice to be able to lock down the left side of that offensive line for a couple of seasons and just go, hey, we don't have to worry about that as long as we keep him healthy. So next one, I had teased. I'm pretty sure it's going to be something similar about Alvin Kamara and kind of the running backs is the kind of the next. Hey, what questions are we going to have to answer um, in training camp? So got that one in the works. I'm not promising anything, but that's my plans. That next time that video will be ready, and that's what we'll be dropping. So until then, I'm Tim. Peace out and who dat.